so I thought I would just, as a part of that, kind of begin today by looking at some of those Valentine's Day gifts that did not quite land well. I could just explore, like, which ones just didn't make the cut this year? What would they be? And so I started looking around and seeing what people were posting online. And there was one website, actually it was a Facebook page, that kind of helped me. They put out to their more than 500,000 followers this plea: tell us what your worst Valentine's Day gift ever was. And I was just reading through these, loving these to death. So I thought I would share my top 5 with you this morning, just to make us all feel better about wherever our Valentine's Day landed this year, whatever it looked like. The first one is for those of you out there who are such great, have such great memories. Like, if you've got a great memory, you hear something that someone says, and you just hold on to that, and you're like, I'm going to come back to that a little later. This is for you. This person took it just a little bit too far. On New Year's Day, I mentioned to my husband that we needed a toilet seat. 6 weeks later, on Valentine's Day, he presented me, yes, with none other than a toilet seat. There you have it. So that's just for those mind like a steel trap. Now, the next one, make it worse. He bought me a Slim Jim car tool because I keep locking my keys in the car. Right? Creativity and practicality at its best. Like, you just merge those two worlds together and bring it's absolutely. Now, the next one, I just want to bring up the first 2 words of the next one real quick. Let's just look at that. So, whatever is on the other side of this one, you know not to do this. I don't care where we go from here. It's just not going to be good. But this one says, my ex-girlfriend got me a Weight Watchers plan as a gift. Just because I have a few extra pounds on me doesn't mean I want to be forced into a corner. I mean, it may be the perfect gift. Nobody's debating it, but it's just the wrong gift at the right time, maybe. I don't know. All right, the next one. Now, hold on, before you put this up. There's and you as my boyfriend. I never bothered to ask about his fear of heights. He was less than happy, but somehow I coaxed him on the helicopter. And just in case you wondered what was at the end of that, and oh, by the way, it crashed, right? So, luckily they did all walk away at the end of that, but you've not only fed into the fear that this individual had, but you just sort of sealed the deal on him never getting over that fear. They also are exes at this point in time, as I've been told. And then the final one of all, now this is really important. In terms of conflict management, we'll get into some conflict management here in just a few minutes. I'm a big fan of the sandwich method, right? You kind of put something good on the front end, you put the meat of the matter right there in the center, and then you back it up with something good on the back end. Like, that's just a great sandwich mentality. It doesn't always work for every bit of communication. And this she gets there. Remember, sandwich method, not always working. I get there. As we eat our meal, he slid over a note telling me he wanted out. Like, this is not the Valentine's Day that you wanted. Like, that's just not where it's at. And again, the sandwich method doesn't work in every occasion. Now, here's the interesting thing. We laugh at these. We laugh at them because we know they could be us. In fact, we laugh at them sometimes because we know they have been us, just with different words and in different scenarios. In fact, some of you might not be laughing right now because 2 days ago, this was you, and it's a little too soon, and we don't want to laugh yet. Give it till next year, and you'll laugh a little bit more at it. But in either case, wherever you land today, if you've got this in a distant memory or a current memory, I've got good news. I'm talking this week, we're going to talk about forgiveness, and hopefully in that combination, whatever you have come into this room with, you're going to feel a little bit lighthearted and a little bit ready to face those challenges. And forgiveness is one of those heavy topics. In fact, I thought back about all the topics that we've addressed with Howard Thurman. Howard Thurman, man, he gets deep and heavy quick. We started this series off by talking about a commitment that was all-consuming. We moved into this concept of fear, and a fear of God that actually would compel us to action, not to shy away from it, but to be completely overwhelmed. And we talked about the way that love doesn't demand for us to just have a general love of all humanity, but if we really, really want to love the way Jesus asked us to love, we've got to get specific with our love. We have to have specific faces and names and situations and places where we can practice our love. And this week, we get to forgiveness. A sermon that he delivered on forgiveness, this particular parable that we'll look at in just a few minutes. And as we get into this, again, we're dealing with an incredibly heavy, heavy topic. But one of the reasons it's really heavy for most of us is because I think it's a general, that with regard to forgiveness, there is a general understanding of what's happening when we forgive another person. In our world, there is a misunderstanding that we carry into all kinds of scenarios, all kinds of different environments, and that misunderstanding is simply this, that forgiveness is for the benefit of the offender. That's the misunderstanding that we hold. We assume that forgiveness is out there for the benefit of the offender. I want to do something nice for the person who has hurt me. What am I going to do? I'll forgive them. That's the nice thing to do. That's the upper-handed thing to do, right? If I want to take the high road, I forgive them. I'll be the bigger person, and I will forgive them. Whenever I forgive them, I am doing them a favor. And here's why we believe this. We believe that that's the case because when we are hurt in one way or another, whenever we're offended in life by someone or something around us, if we feel as if someone owes us something. You may have been in that scenario. Anytime there's an offense that comes our way, we immediately feel like there is a debt that needs to be paid towards us. And this debt is looming out there, and someone needs to pay it. In fact, that's why you might have said this even this past week to someone, you owe me an apology, right? There is a debt that needs, if someone wrongs us, if an apology is in place, we use that phrase right there, you owe me an apology. And when we don't get that apology, then frustration and anger and all these things start to swell up in our hearts whenever we're hurt, whenever we're offended, and that debt is looming over our head. In fact, some of you on your job, you might feel that your boss or someone around you sort of owes you something. They need to pay you back for some hurt that they have caused you. And when they don't do it, what happens? Resentment builds up in you. To well up in our heart. And then something most of us do, and I love this part. This is actually my favorite. Conversation about what we would say to that person. We're always right in these conversations, and we always come out sounding amazing. In fact, in my conversations, I like to imagine that it's not just me and the other person, but there's a crowd around us, because I want to make sure that they hear what is being said, because it's just brilliant as it comes off my lips, right? I want to make sure that that's there. And these are the conversations that we have. We build our case. I don't give them the benefit. I don't need to release them from something. I don't owe them anything. And so time and time again, we hold on to this anger, this resentment, and if anybody pushes us in the direction of forgiveness, we're pushed to an edge where we finally ask the question, when is enough enough? When is enough enough in our lives, in our relationships with other people? And this is exactly the type of question that Peter got to when Jesus was talking about conflict management in Matthew chapter 18. In Matthew chapter 18, we won't go over the whole chapter today. We're just going to look at the parable. People, go back to them, engage them again in conversation. If that doesn't work, go back, grab the whole community of people, surround them with people. Like he's giving this practical advice, and in the middle of it, Peter goes, hey, Master, listen, I understand what you're saying in terms of like engaging in conflict management and helping. What happens if someone is a repeat offender? Right? What happens if they come back over and over and over again? Like, when is enough? Enough. In fact, the way Peter says it in Matthew 18:21, Lord, if another member of the church sins against me, how often should I forgive that person? How many times am I obliged to go back and to forgive that person? Again, if they're offending me, they owe me something, so my obligation to forgive them is just for their benefit. So I just want to know, how often do I need to give something to them for their benefit? And Peter actually gets kind of generous with this. He answers his own question. How often should I forgive them? Then he goes on, as many as 7 times? Like, that seems pretty generous. If someone's going to hurt me this way, hurt me this deeply, I'll just forgive them 7 times. I mean, that's a good, round, complete number. I think that works. And Jesus, without missing a beat, looks back at him. And Jesus said to him, no, not 7 times. But I tell you, 77 times. Some of your translations actually say 7 times 70 or 70 times 7. Like, the point is not the exact number. The point is, no, it's ridiculous to get locked in on a number that you would tabulate up. And without missing a beat, Jesus just jumps into a story. In fact, I love the way Jesus does this, because he gives him this really curt answer, almost to the point to say, here's your tweetable phrase. Go ahead and push it out there if you want to. But just know this. Nobody's mind had ever been changed by a tweetable phrase. So let me tell you a story, guys. And then he pauses and he tells this story, right? He gives them the phrase, he tells them exactly what he's thinking, but then he tells them this story without missing a beat. And the story is about a landowner who's wanting to reconcile his books. Tax season, right? He's got to make sure all things add up in his mind. He's going back and he's reconciling his books. In verse 23, for this reason the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who wished to settle accounts with his slaves. And here's what happens. When he begins the reckoning process, when he begins the accounting process and everything is adding up, he starts to look through his books and he sees this enormous line item. He says, where is this 10,000 talents coming from? And he starts to discover that one who owed him 10,000 talents was in his books. And so they brought him into him. Right? There's 10,000 talents out there. Now, just to give you an idea, 10,000 in today's money would be $1 million. That's what we're dealing with when he says there's this line item for 10,000 talents. It's more money than a slave. Live in, but that's how it worked in that age, that people could be sold in order to regain some money. He wouldn't get all of the money back through their sale, but he'd get some of the money back and he'd clear his debts. And this is terrible. And immediately the servant, when he hears this fate that lies before him, panic-stricken, he falls to his knees and he begs the master to have mercy on him. It says in verse 26, so the slave fell on his knees before him, saying, have patience with me, and I will pay you everything. Now, that's a ridiculous phrase, right? And everybody who is listening to Jesus' story already longer owed, especially in light of the way that we often think of forgiveness as someone owing someone else something. And if we forgave someone, then we release them of the debt that they owe us. And Jesus knows this, and so he leans into this language. And the servant's thinking, what do you mean release? What do you mean I don't owe you anything? The master's like, well, it's mine to give. It's my money. It's my debt. I can forgive whatever I want to forgive. I can do whatever I want with that. It's forgiven. You no longer owe me anything. You don't owe it. Debt is canceled. End of story. And in shock and awe, the servant kind of backs out. It's like, is this really happening? And he goes back to the street. And the story could end right there, is this amazing story of grace and all of those things. It doesn't stop the story there. That this slave, but he comes outside, and the slave that he encounters is 100 denarii. It would take just a few days of work in order to repay this debt right here. Just a few days. If he just give his fellow slave a few days, denarii, refused to forgive him. He refused to forgive him. And then he went and he threw this and at that point, the Lord talks back to the first servant. The Lord summons him and said to him, "You wicked slave, I forgave, I canceled. I rid my books of all that you owe me, of all the debt that was there, because you pleaded with me." And then he levels this final question on him. "Should you not have shown mercy on your fellow slave as I had mercy on you?" And in his anger, the Lord handed him over to be tortured until he would pay back his entire debt. And Jesus ends the story right there. Story, there is a hypocrisy that rests deep inside of our hearts. Peter sees that hypocrisy, the crowd see that hypocrisy, and you and I, hearing this story 2,000 years later, we feel that hypocrisy somewhere deep inside of us. And Jesus is wonderful this way, isn't he? Where he takes us on this journey, and we never expected a light to even shine in this direction in our life. And he tells this story, and all of a sudden there's a light there that we can't ignore and we have to respond to. And so when Peter asks the question, when is enough enough? How many times do I need to forgive? What do I need to do, God? Jesus knows that there is a deeper, deeper issue that facing. And it's one faces, but one and over again. Peter didn't want to really admit that that was reality. You and I, we don't want to admit that that's our reality, that that's where we're at in the world. But if we think about it long enough, our actions in the world betray us. Because there's so many times in our world where we will offend somebody else and we'll try to explain it away and we'll try to beg for mercy and we'll try to beg for their forgiveness because I ultimately know what my intentions were. I know the intent of my heart, and I know that I didn't mean to offend you or I didn't mean to harm you. Us to consistently live in a pattern of thinking that ultimately leads us to self-destruction. You see, here's the thing. We think that our ability to ask for mercy and our ability to demand justice, that we are in some way life. And Jesus highlights actually on a path when you refuse forgiveness to other people, you're actually on a path towards self-destruction. He knows that the path of unforgiveness is one that will ultimately lead to your destruction. He loves you so much that he will not let you go down that path. He will not let unforgiveness tear you up and rip you up inside. He's not going to allow that. He will, as Jesus says in other parts, if we do not forgive our neighbor, if we do not forgive others, he will not forgive us. It's why in the Lord's Prayer he says, forgive us today our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. It's this exchange that when we understand that life, not death, life is found in forgiveness, everything changes. And here's how we're going to end today. I invite you to do as we finish up today. It's just symbolically, I want you to place those moments of unforgiveness in your hands. You don't have to hold your hands up like this. Keep them to your side, do whatever you want. I just want you to think for a few minutes about what that unforgiveness is. I want you to place it in your hands, and as you place it in your hands, I just want you to kind of grip down on your hands. Just close your hands up. Wrap them in a fist. And just hold tightly on there for a few minutes. I don't want you to let it go. I want it to be the center of your attention and your thought for just a few minutes. In a few minutes, I'm going to invite you to extend your hands heavenward to hold. just want you, as you grip your hands together, to imagine who or what situation would it be that you would grip the throat of. Say, I'm not letting go. Some other event in our life has choked us out. We think, God, that we're gripping them and we're holding something over them and we're hurting them. But as we hold our hands high in the sky, with our fists clenched, we realize how much pain it causes us. We feel the heavy burden that it is to hold that unforgiveness in our hearts. God, this morning, we recognize those people who have hurt us. In our hearts, we name them by name. In our hearts, we name the ways in which they have offended us and hurt us. And as we name each of them, maybe our fists get tighter and tighter as we feel that weight. God, by your mercy, release us this morning. If you've not already done so, go ahead and release your hands. Extend your hands out. God, as we release our hands, feel the rush of life come back into our fists. Feel the blood begin to flow once again for those members of our body that are dying. God, in the same way, help us to release those who have a stranglehold on our life today through unforgiveness. Help us to forgive. Help us to remember that forgiveness is not about the benefit of someone else. Benefit of others, but for our own benefit in our own life. And God, in the same way that we released that forgiveness, help us to receive your forgiveness today. God, I know that it's so very difficult in our lives to receive forgiveness from you without first having practiced it. I know there's this blockade in our minds. And if that blockade is there for anyone this morning, as we experience forgiving others in our hearts and our minds, help us to experience your forgiveness in our life and our heart today. Help us to receive that in this moment, to be cleansed by that, and to be given new life through that. Precious Father, we thank you for your Lord, and might be God on. Go with us today, Spirit of God, with grace and with truth. And we thank you for it. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you so much. Thank you. Continual partnership and ministry and mission into the world. Go forth from this place rejoicing in God the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.